I don't think punching a man in the face repeatedly is going to win Rusty any favors in the court of public opinion. But I bet it sure did feel good. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. Latest episode of Presumed Innocent is here. It is called Burden. It's episode 4. This one's a bit delayed because, Dark Matter took precedent. I watched these both on the same day, but now that Dark Matter is done for a while, possibly forever, I can kind of focus now on Presumed Innocent and get these to you on time. This episode of Presumed Innocent and the show as a whole has been doing the absolute most to do two things. One, to present as many red herrings as they possibly can over the course of the show, and two, to make it seem like Rusty could have possibly done this. And that's sort of the balancing act that they're trying to do while still telling the story that has been told before, and that there are going to be a great deal of the audience that is already well aware of where they're heading. That said, I think it's succeeding pretty well at doing those two things. This episode picks up at the end of the last one where we know Kyle is not the person who murdered Carolyn, but they present him at the end of the last episode as the person who was there. What we had to see is, hey, was Rusty going to be a person that throws his kid under the bus to create reasonable doubt? And he's a good father. He's not doing that, but he does want to check his kid and see why the hell he was there. So he informs Barbara of what he saw on the tape, and they both go into Kyle's room and do an interrogation. Rusty's doing more of the interrogation. Barbara's trying to just ask her son, like, why are you there? Kyle initially denies, like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Then he's like, I was just there. And then he's like, I knew about the affair. You're like, well, wow, that escalated quickly. Mind you, the daughter is listening through the walls and hearing all of this. But yeah, son knew of the affair and was following to. First, originally said, I was just following you. Then he said, I wanted to see what she looked like, which we all kind of got to call BS on. Even Rusty did, and saying, hey, you could just Google her. Like, she was a well-known attorney. You can just Google her name and it's going to be a photo of her with a still Sony-like headshot of like. So I don't know why that was the first response. It's clear that he's just kind of coming up with stuff out of fear and out of nerves, and he's clearly, how it reads to me, is hiding something else, because he continuously lies on top of lies on top of lies until Barbara kind of gives him an out and says, hey, Dad, stop interrogating him. Get out the room. He and I will talk. I won't read much into that because I don't want to get ahead of myself and ruin it for folks who have not seen anything else about Presumed Innocent or read anything about Presumed Innocent. But I would just say bookmark that point, bookmark that scene. I will say that it's important that Rusty feels more angry that his son he feels more angry that his son would kill his side piece than he is that his son's a murderer and that his son may have done this. Like, he seems more like adamant, like, why would you have done this? Why were you there? Why were you there? He's trying to get clues about that more than like, hey, I'm protecting my son. While he is, I think, a good dad and not throwing his kid under the bus about putting him as an option up there for grabs, he's not doing a really good job of not wearing his heart on his sleeve. He's like, I care more about, in this instance, about Carolyn than I do about you. And it's brought up a little bit later. And it had nothing. This is a piece that was not a part of the original book or series because everybody was white. But Barbara brings up like, hey, I think sometimes you forget that your son's black, and bringing this up and what this does for this moment and all that stuff. There's a little bit more context put on the plate for this series because of that just small little change in casting and character development. Rusty goes for a walk to sort of clear his head, and while he's going for a walk, he is remembering the case that is reminiscent of the way that she died. He's going over, like, basically it will seem like Carolyn either opening or closing arguments, but she's going over that, and he's just in awe of her. You can tell that no matter what she did, she has opened up something in him that he has not had with Barbara in quite some time. And each time that we sort of see him, he is like a puppy dog at her. And sometimes she's just doing work. I think she has fun with Rusty, but sometimes she's just in it for work. He returns home after his walk and he's doing some stuff in the garage when Barbara meets him and says, "Hey, you got to remember some things." And so I talked with him and I chatted with him. He said he rode by there a couple of times. He saw you go in once. He's been carrying around this for months, so we should probably do some stuff to get him some therapy. And he's like, "Why? We can just talk to him. Like, he doesn't need therapy." I don't know if it's a matter of he was trying to hide or not go into depth with his son about this relationship. I don't. Rusty seems very defensive. It's like, we can just handle this ourselves. We don't need to go to therapy. And I think he's clearly he's adamant against therapy. He doesn't feel like therapy is doing him any favors, but Barbara's clearly pro therapy. She's like, well, we need to have a therapist or a third party because the way that you just spoke to him was more of an interrogation than it was like, hey, let's talk about this. And it's clear that whatever is going on in your head, you can't have a clean cut conversation about this. It's always going to come off one type of way. They start going at each other and basically throwing mud at each other. What the F is wrong with you? What the F is wrong with you? Rusty says that, hey, this me having an affair is your fault, Barbara. I'm like, well, that's not accurate. But he's basically like, you play a part of this, and at some point in time, you got to take responsibility for this too. It's a lot of him just lashing out, and I think this episode is probably the best episode that has shown what happens when Rusty gets angry. Like his angriest kind of happens. Obviously, he's not going to hit his kids or his wife, but there's a verbal anger that comes out in this, and we get the physical one at the tail end. We see quite a few scenes of Tommy kind of going through prep with the forensics analyst, and with the other lawyer that is on her firm, who knew about Carolyn and Rusty's relationship. He's just kind of like running them through the paces and kind of being a little bit forceful. He wants them to be prepped in a way where he's tying up any loose ends, and so we see a lot of him sort of edging and pushing people probably beyond where they should be, because he has so much sort of riding on this case. Rusty tells Raymond that Kyle is on the video, and Raymond's like, well, hold on. Are we so sure that he didn't kill him? And Rusty's like, no, he did not kill him. And I feel like it's a little bit of Raymond in his brain kind of doing what us as an audience, like, well, maybe, do you want to present him as an option? Because that clearly is going to get you off. And Rusty's pretty much like, nah, not funny. We're not bringing it up. He has nothing to do with this. Like I said, the defense isn't going to bring it up because they don't want to put another person at the scene other than Rusty. But he says, like, yeah, Barbara and I got into a really big tiff. And Raymond's like, well, she's a saint. The fact that she's still around is pretty insane. And if she hasn't left by now, she's not going to leave after this argument. But the reason why she's super feisty this time is because you are questioning her kid. Like, the betrayal of the children is different than the betrayal of her. She can sort of internalize that and deal with it on her own. But now that the kids know, that the kids knew, well, one of them knew, and now they both know, and sort of we're trying to do things about it. You've betrayed multiple people, and now she's become a mother bear now, and she has to sort of do all of this at once. So it's a different anger and a different hurt that Barbara's going through now. It's the second time that she's doing it, but the first time was just her. Fine. Now she has more sort of cubs that she has to sort of take care of, and you have to do more with legwork here than you did before, Rusty. It then tells him, like, you don't take responsibility for it. Like, nothing. You don't take responsibility for anything that you do wrong. You don't show shame or guilt. Like, you're walking around here without showing like you have any remorse or any shame or any guilt for anything that's happening. The affair, not the murder. I don't think you did the murder. So I don't believe you should have shown shame or guilt for that. But for the affair, I know you feel shame because you got caught. But I don't think you feel guilty. Like, I think you'd still be doing this affair. If she was alive, you'd be still trying to go knock on that door. And while we are, as an audience, to believe that Rusty did not do this, somebody in his circle knew that and was like, well, I'm stopping this because you won't do it. I'm going to stop it on my end. Whoever that is, I think is probably a part of his familial ties or some of his friends who is aware of this. They're probably like, hey, we need to end this because he's not in his right mind to do this on his own. Tommy brings in Carolyn's ex-husband, and son, Michael, to sort of get a little bit more information and just close up some ranks, some some details, and he wants to confirm some information. And basically, he's asking like, "Well, when you saw him, how was he? Like, how was he? How was he acting? How was he responding?" It's like I could see in his eyes that he was something was off. And I remember once that mom said that she was afraid of somebody that she worked with. Now, she didn't say by name, so it wasn't necessarily Rusty, but she said, I was afraid of somebody that I work with, and she was beginning to scare me. She didn't say who, but she did say that she had cases with him. So he just naturally inferred that it was Rusty. And all signs sort of point to that. But who else knows who she could have been afraid of? We don't really get the idea of that, but Tommy sort of runs with that. Like, well, that's definitely Rusty. Let me go off to the to the races with that. Barbara returns to the bar that she went to go visit and kind of had that one-on-one with Mr. Insecure. His name is Clifton here, but that's what I'm calling him at the moment. She returns there, and there's another bartender there. She's about to get a drink, and she's like, "Well, if he ain't here, then I don't really need a beer." She's about to exit, and he comes from the back, and they have a flirt session. They get their flirt on, pass numbers, pass information, and kind of just get closer. Detective Alana finds a hit on some sperm sample that was at the scene, and they found them through Ancestry.com. This is one thing that some of these things have been updated from the book and the film to current day. Like Ancestry.com didn't exist at that point in time, so even be able to find this through that is different. But she takes Rusty to go to this person's house just to ask him questions, and she tells Rusty to like, "Hey, play it cool. I'm the cop here. Let me be the person to talk. You just sit silent." Um, she goes in to talk to Ratzner, and Ratzner is a bit cagey. You can tell that he's hiding something. Something is off with him, but Alana is not pushing. Rusty is, though. And Rusty's sort of just forcing himself into the conversation and kind of just saying, "Hey, sooner or later, you're going to have to tell us what's going on." And he's being very aggressive to the point that Rusty's like, "Don't I know you?" He's not putting two and two together, but that just proves a good point. Rusty should be a little cleaner with how he's doing this. He's not a non-known figure at this point. His photo and his name has been spread out everywhere. And so while it doesn't click, it's probably going to click later. It does. And so he should be treading a little lighter than just kind of going guns blazing. But this, again, goes to show you that when he gets he's like a dog on a bone. When he gets an idea, when he gets something, his anger kind of leads him astray, and he goes in guns wailing before he actually stops and thinks about the situation first. Kyle goes to therapy, not going well. But it's the same therapist. It's Miss Rabe. It's the same therapist that Barbara and Rusty are going to, and the therapist says, "Hey, this is a conflict of interest. I should not be. I should not be a therapist to all three of you. In fact, because of the situation and everything that's going on, you all should each have a different therapist because I have information coming from all of you. You guys need to have your own thing." And Barbara's like, "Well, we can't afford that. We can't all afford 3 different therapists." She's like, "Well, the person that needs the most help is you, Barbara. So I would like to keep you on as a client and sort of get rid of the other 2, which I don't think the other 2 are going to really care." Kyle doesn't want to be there, and Rusty doesn't want to do it either. But Barbara, especially with going through this and opening up old wounds again, probably is the one that needs the most therapy. Rusty and Maya meet, and she's trying to just get some more information about the background of their relationship. And she's asking about the night of the murder, trying to just get information and a read on that entire night. And Rusty walks her through it. He says that he was at the office and he was texting Carolyn incessantly and getting no response. Just texting, just love bombing her phone. And she was ghosting him, and it made him feel a type of way. He then, instead of going directly home, he went to a bar. And he doesn't quite remember all the details about the bar because he was drinking and feeling pretty good. But he does recall that he was at the bar, he had his phone up, and after all those love bomb texts, Carolyn finally responded back. She's like, "Well, Jesus Christ, just come the fuck over." Like, that's what the text says. And that's his moments of like, boom, pay the check and get the hell up out of here. He grabs his phone and he heads over there. And he races over, and the time that it is set, he goes over there, gets there quickly. They argue, is what he says, for roughly 51 minutes. The way the time sort of works out, they argue, he leaves and heads home. That's about a 51-minute time span. She's trying to just trace the minutes. But he says, like, we argued and then I left. She said, like, well, she did give me a kiss, and she knew that that kiss would satiate me enough to just send me on my way. And then we left. Rusty's detail of events and the way that he says it is a little too clean. And there's something missing in him racing over there. That all tracks. Everything there tracks. But when he goes in there, we're getting the story of him going in there and them just arguing for 51 minutes doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. Like, did they make love? Did they angry? Like, did they fight? Like, what exactly took place in those 51 minutes? And it's never quite clear. Some of that might be because he was inebriated. Like, he may not remember all the things that sort of took place. He may remember the good things. He remember the bad things. Who knows? You know, when you get drunk, that's what you do. There's pieces, fragments of nights that you don't remember anymore. So that could be what's happening, or he's just bold-faced lying. I don't know what it is, but whatever he gave Maya right now is not the 100% accurate way that night went once he got there. And I'm sure as the season goes along, we will get a true retelling of that. I don't know if we'll do it actually through Carolyn's eyes, or how we'll get there, or the person who was actually the murderer, if we see it through their eyes. But somehow we're going to get the true scene of that, because nothing about that works. After her rendezvous with Clifton, Barbara takes her drunk behind home, and she and Rusty get it on. It's a passionate love, but you can tell they're both eyes closed. Neither of them are actually looking at each other. You can both tell that in that moment they are doing things to each other that they don't normally do. The passion is much more heightened than it normally would be. She's probably thinking about Clifton. He's probably thinking about Carolyn, and it's just sort of they're taking their sexual frustration and sexual energy out on each other. After that situation, they kind of debrief about their sex, if you will, by the poolside, and they're like, "She woke something up inside of me, like something I needed. I got something from Carolyn that I did not get from you." And so when I said that earlier about how this part, that's kind of what I meant. But this has nothing to do. It's not your fault. This is all me. We were so far apart. And Barbara was like, "Well, the sex we just had felt like you and I were proving to each other that we still had something together." And Rusty says, "Well, do we?" He's interrupted. He doesn't get to kind of answer. She doesn't get to answer that question and give a response back, because while they're making love, Raymond meets with Nico and Tommy. And Raymond comes in, guns blazing, like feeling good about life. Like, look, I don't have a case. Yeah, I have no case whatsoever. My client's evidence, Rusty's evidence, is not in the car, is not at the scene. There's no blood in her, no Carolyn's blood in the car. You guys have got nothing. Nothing at all. And there's a reason why you put the obstruction charge on the table. Mind you, Nico said take that off anyway. There's a reason why you guys have that. Raymond was like, "I'm going to call your bluff. Since you guys don't have anything, here's what we're going to do. We're going to plea out to the obstruction. Take 3 years. He might serve. In the 3 years, he might serve a year, maybe. And then you guys will throw out the murder. The murder, we won't go for it." And they're kind of like, "You really think we're going to take you on that?" It's like, "Well, you guys have nothing. You don't have a thing." And then Tommy, without saying a word, just slides over a folder. And the folder sets Raymond back a bit. And he's like, "Well, hold on. Why am I just not seeing this?" And they're like, "Well, this just came across my desk like moments before we had our meeting." There's a folder that the forensic guy that he was pushing a little earlier comes to bring Tommy. And so this is the presentation of that. And so when Rusty and Barbara are having that conversation, he's interrupted by Raymond, who calls and says, "Hey, real quick, we got a problem. Some new evidence has just come in. They have your skin fibers under Carolyn's nails." Now, Rusty is adamant to say, someone is framing me up. Someone is jamming me up right now, because that's not possible. She never scratched me. There's no way that my skin is under her nails. That under no circumstance, she didn't scratch me, and we didn't. He's basically alluding to, like, we didn't get that intense in our sex that she would have skin fibers under her nails. Like, someone has planted that evidence there. And Raymond's like, "Well, I don't know what's going on, but now we're in the thick of it." But while he's on the phone with Raymond, there is someone just beating at the door at his front at Rusty's front door, just knocking profusely at Rusty's front door. Knocking. Jaden, Kyle is freaking out. His daughter's freaking out. All of them are freaking out. They're like, Dad, what's going on? What's going on? He peeks through the window, and it's Ratchner, who finally had sort of put two and two together. They're like, oh, I know who you are. You came to my house, started accusing me. I'm coming to your house, and we're gonna talk this out. We're gonna freak this out. But he's being super aggressive, and the scene is getting heightened. He is intense about the information that he just got over the phone from Raymond. He's intense about protecting his kids and his wife. And he just opens the door and just starts wailing on Ratchner, just punching the hell out of him. And that's how the show ends. This episode ends with that. Protecting his family. He's not going to be able to really say that because Ratchner wasn't inside the house. He opened the door and then attacked him outside. But we're going to say de-escalating the situation, protecting his family is what Rusty was attempting to do. And if he were not up for a murder charge, I think that would be like, yeah, that makes sense. But because he is up for a murder charge, that looks like this guy can't control his temper, and his anger sort of lashes out at moments. And so when I said at the very beginning, said in jest, the court of public opinion on this is going to not do Rusty any favors because you have just gone and pummeled a man that you went to speak to with Detective Line. That's all going to come out. Everything that you did is going to come out, and the fact that you went to his house and all of that. So it's not going to be just this guy came to your, this random person just came to your house and you punched him out. You provoked him. He came to you. Then this is sort of ensued. So it just adds a little bit more of a messy layer on top of everything else that occurred. But yeah, a decent episode. Again, a lot of me having to step around where, if this is leading to where the book and the film went to, I have to step around some things and kind of just like hint, bookmark what I said, bookmark. But yeah, we take Kyle off the board pretty much. And you clearly see the defense is not going to use him as an option. But now we're putting Ratchner into play. I'm sure they'll probably throw about two more before we actually get to the meat and potatoes of who truly is at the fault of this murder. This episode was his biggest piece, was to take Kyle off the board and sort of present Rusty that he's a hothead. And when he gets angry, it's sort of hard to stop him. But that's the latest episode of Presumed Innocent. Like I said, these will be coming a little bit more on time now that Dark Matter is out of the way. But what did you guys think about this episode? What are your thoughts and comments in the comments below? If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We are there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.